Okay, the government's budget process is complicated. There's a lot of steps, but this I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. You're also going to have an opportunity to review a citizen's guide to understanding the federal budget. The budget year or the fiscal year for the federal government runs from October to September 30th. The first step is that agencies review what they need. Then they give a request to the OMB and the president, which create or prepare a budget. Those budget requests prepared by the executive branch gets passed on to the Congress. Congress is going to hold congressional hearings. The CBO is going to, the Congressional Budget Office is going to advise these congressional hearings on the likelihood of being able to carry out this budget. A budget resolution, which is like a budget bill, is voted on both houses of Congress, and then it's passed on to conference committee for there to be compromises between the two different houses' proposed budget, and eventually Congress committees appropriate the money. Okay, so in a little bit more detail. First, agencies review their annual budget. Agencies prioritize their spending to the programs that they feel are most important to their agency. Example, the Department of Transportation feels it is important to have safe bridges and highways, so they're going to include an incremental increase for bridges and highway safety construction for their budget in the next year. OMB and the President are going to review the agency's request. The President and the Director of the OMB modifies the agency's request and prioritize these requests based on the President's agenda. Example, President believes that we should spend more money on infrastructure, then he's going to appropriate more money on building those safe roads and bridges. If the remember, the President can't cut mandatory spending, which would be interest on debt, Social Security, or Medicare. So he is limited to what he can play with. He may only play with discretionary spending. The President then presents his budget request to Congress. Congressional committees hold hearings. Budget committees of the House hold hearings on the budget. The CBO, the GAO, these two offices come with reports of the economic outlook for the country and an analysis of the budget request. Do we really think that this is a good budget for our current economy? And the GAO will also look at whether or not the money has been spent appropriately in the past. They're the ones who are going to hold the agencies accountable for their spending. They'll ask questions in the committee hearings like, does each agency really need that much money? Why or why not? And interest groups, like part of the Iron Triangle, can provide information at these hearings regarding the budget. The fourth step, a budget resolution is prepared for action on the floor of the House and the Senate. This is going to entail things like log rolling, debating, and the amendment process. A budget bill, when two different versions of the budget bill are passed, it goes to a conference committee. Both representatives and senators have to agree on the budget resolution that will be appropriated. The Senate has probably added earmarks or pork that has no germaneness at all, or stuff that the House had never seen. So essentially, you are going to have two different versions of a budget that you're going to have to compromise on. Appropriations committees. They determine how the federal funds will actually be distributed. They choose a committee to develop the actual details of how the money will be appropriated to the corresponding committees or to the corresponding agencies. The House Committee on Agriculture will appropriate the money to the Department of Interior or the Department of Agriculture. They're also going to include instructions on how the money should be spent by the agency. National debt. National debt occurs when we spend more than we make. We have to borrow. When we borrow, we have to pay interest on the money. We have mandatory spending, so it's difficult to cut spending because there's so much of the chunk of a budget that we have to actually appropriate out. In a recession, we have even more mandatory spending because we have even more entitlement programs because even more people are in need. It's risky to raise taxes during a recession too because people have less disposable income. So if you raise taxes to pay for the entitlements for the people who are struggling, you're actually going to undermine growth in the economy because people are having to pay taxes instead of going to Target and blowing their money on stuff they don't need, which actually helps the economy. So instead of asking the American taxpayer to give the money, we borrow the money and we pay back the interest. Okay. That's our national debt. You can see that it has grown exponentially.